Just welcome everybody. Yeah, Kat is no stranger to a lot of us. I think we've heard her speak sometimes before. I'm particularly interested in this one, Kat. I do look back on where it went right, but I also look back on where it went wrong. And I'm still looking for answers to where we are now as well, because all the children are different. I've still got two that I've got to find answers for in certain ways. So I'll hand over, and really looking forward to this one. So it's all yours. Thank you.
Oh, I'm very excited. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Kat Patrick. Some of you may know me from the Charlotte Mason Conversations UK group, where I'm one of the admins, and I have been running one of the book studies on there for a while. But and kind of dipping in and out of UK home education. I spoke at Learn Free a couple of talks last year. And this one's going to be more informal. And so to set the mood, I've got my happy coffee. So, and I don't have a PowerPoint. So this is going to be more of a kind of sitting around on our settees, and I'm just going to reminisce a little bit about some things that I thought, looking back after about 20 years of home educating, the things that I think are things I'm kind of proud of, and I think I would do again. And then there are some things that if I could do it over, I'd do slightly differently. I don't know what stage everyone's in. I know quite a number of you are secondary people. So how many of you are primary people? Maybe just type in the message me or something. So because I can't see, now that they've made it speaker view, I can't see everybody now. So you all know how to find the chat box and write me. So Anya is a primary person. Oh, Rebecca, of course you are. Preschool, okay, mixture. Well, I am going to cover the whole gamut. Because although there are, 6 or 7 or 8 people here, there's going to be a lot of people watching back the video who will be at all stages. So I'm going to cover all of them. And the other thing is, I suppose I should introduce myself a little bit more. I was a secondary school teacher for a number of years in Oxford. Then I had my first child, and I went back to school for a while, and I realized that I wasn't really doing a great job as a teacher or as a mummy, and I thought one of them had to go. And I thought, yeah, motherhood can't go. So I went ahead and quit my job, and then was just a mom for about 10 years, really, I suppose. And in that time, I ended up squeezing out a few more puppies, and ended up with 4 kids, girl, boy. And I thought I'd start off with sort of exhibit A, and then I have to turn my phone off, or I'm sure it'll disturb our class. So I just had these photos taken because my eldest, who's at university, she just came back about a week or so ago. And I also had my 16-year-old was stuck in England for COVID for 14 months with her dad, who lives in Oxford. My husband and I are happily married. This seems like a very odd relationship, but we do live on different continents. And my daughter went out to swim and try to make the national swim team, and then COVID hit, and then her passport ran out, and the embassy was closed, and we couldn't get her back until about a month ago now. So I had these photos taken just this weekend, celebrating all 4 kids back under one roof. And that will give you an idea of my rogues gallery there. So the eldest is this daughter, that's Lauren. Then that's Marcus, he's 18. He's just graduating and off to university next year. If you've heard any of my talks in the past, he's my reluctant writer, or he was my reluctant writer. This is the swimmer. Where's that? Where's my finger? Let me try. There we go. That's the swimmer. She's 16. That's Antonia. And then that's Joey, who's 14. My husband says he's his last hope for getting into MIT as a scientist. So anyway, that's my rogues gallery. Starting in 2012, I started teaching live online classes in a Charlotte Mason way, which means living books and quite rigorous classes. And a number of your kids who are in here have been on those courses. So I won't say very much about them, but basically, I've been teaching, I don't know, probably now 1,000 home educated students. So when I look back on things that sort of what went right and what could have gone better, I have this kind of bigger view too about how the method that I was using was very successful and not just for my own kids. So I suppose that sort of brings me up to date. Although last thing, I do have a hobby of showing and breeding dogs, English Toy Terriers. And my husband just got a puppy about 2 weeks ago for himself, because I took all the other ones to America. And so we now are a family of 5 dogs, but they don't all live under the same roof. I also found some stray kittens on the side of the road about a week ago, and now I'm fostering them. So one of my things is about how important pets are, how glad I am about having certain pets over the years and what we learned from having pets. It's a very Montessori idea to have a classroom animal or pet to look after. And that's why we first started out with tropical fish. Anyway, I'll get to that. Okay, so this is my plan. And my second part of this plan is that I will type this up and make it available as a PDF as well, but it's not yet. You'll just have to take notes, I think, or watch this back later. Okay, so the first thing that I think that went right from the very beginning is knowing why I wanted to home educate my kids. And the answer is severalfold. I think the last straw was, and I already mentioned it, was I felt like I wasn't being a very good teacher or a very good mom. I wasn't like 100%. Now, probably I've learned since then that you don't have to be 100% on something to do a good job. But at the time I was quite a perfectionist, and I was like, I'm not teaching my students as well as I want. And I'm not really coping that well with my toddler. So I streamlined things and realized as soon as I left school, really, that I felt like school, going to school, the kids that I was teaching, I felt like they went to school all day long and then did homework all night long and all weekend. And I thought, where's the work-life balance of that? And I said, instead of doing that to my own children, I'd rather do the teaching part during the school time and then having weekends and the evenings free. And then I realized very quickly that most of the time spent at school is just a waste of time. There's very little quality teaching that happens in a school. And so I said, well, we'll just do, an hour and a half or 2 hours in the morning and then have the rest of the time free. And I think having that sort of revelation that formal education is much less onerous and time consuming than I think we think from the beginning. And there was other things too, like our primary school was going through a really bad patch of, it had a really great relationship with the churches in town who would have people come in and give talks. And then all of a sudden the board changed and they just cut off the relationship with the churches. And being a person of faith, I didn't want my children to think that God was Sunday and not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as well. So that was another reason that I decided to home educate my kids from a really young age. And I've kept that in mind a long time. The other thing I liked about home education was, particularly as I started adding more and more kids, I love the fact that when it was rainy out in the morning and I was breastfeeding the baby tucked up in bed and reading a book, that I didn't think, oh my gosh, I got to get you fed. I got to get your lunch packed. I've got to get your books together. I've got to bundle the baby into the buggy, go out in this rain and drag you to school. And I was thinking, I'd much rather be here in bed with my cup of tea and my kids snuggled in reading to them. And that relational aspect of home education is something, it always makes me cry to think about it. That picture that I just had taken of them, that just sort of sums it up. These kids, now that they're all back home together, they're staying up until, oh my gosh, like 1 a.m. arguing politics or talking about films or discussing music. And I just think that relationship is so special. And that will be, oh, sorry. That will be something that is going to set them up for life, right? So that relational thing is always when one of my kids would say, like, you know, I want to go to school. First of all, I couldn't be bothered for someone else to be telling me what to do and having to meet someone else's timetable. And the other one was, yeah, but I want you home as a family. It's not right for our family for you to go off and do school. Obviously, now that I've got them in university, it is time for them to do that. But I just felt like up until then, it was staying as a unit as much as possible. And having this one child gone for 14 months, it really was like a hole was out of our heart. And now that she's back, it just feels really complete. Just a moment. And knowing your why from the beginning is part of it, but no matter what stage you're at, it's always really good to revisit your why. And, you know, your why can change. It can modify, it can strengthen, you know, but I just think that why is really important. And so so that's my first topic, like the big, in my outline, the big thing. And I have 3 things underneath that I think are part of that. One is revisiting regularly through prayer or meditation about what your why is. When I've had a struggle sometimes with teaching kids certain things and reading books with them and thinking they're, you know, this is kind of a dance group, this isn't working that great. And I just had this picture in some prayer about Psalm 23, when it's about, you know, you lead me beside still waters and you lead me to the green pastures. And I felt like God saw me as the shepherd of the sheep in that pasture next to the water. And he said, you know, your job is not to make them eat or drink. All you can do is lead them to the sweet waters and the green pastures. That's your job, and protect them. But after that, if they don't eat and drink, that's on them. And that really sort of took the pressure off me if the performance wasn't there. I was like, at least in Charlotte Mason, we talk about the feast. At least I set the feast, right? So that's one thing, is keeping a kind of prayerful or meditation. That can be your responsibility, to always be checking in on the spiritual side of things and seeing if you're on the right path. And if you're not a Christian, then having just some quiet time when you think about this. When you study as a teacher, it's really good practice to be a reflective practitioner. Okay, that's the buzzword, reflective practitioner. And it's basically keeping a journal about what things went well and went wrong, usually a week at a time. And I think that's really useful too. If you're a Christian, then that might be through prayer, a journal or something like that. And if you're not, then still keeping some kind of diary where you talk about what you enjoyed the week, what didn't go so well, what you would have done better. I think that's just, I know, really good practice. What else can I say? I just think that is really helpful to always keep, because sometimes you can feel like we didn't get anything done this week. And until you write it down, you're like, actually, we did a lot. Or maybe we didn't get very much done, but this thing we did was really good quality. So I think that that's something that I've done well over the years, is always kept in touch with the quality of what we're doing and where we do things well and get things done. Another principle of why you home educate, and these are kind of connected. So one is avoiding comparing yourself to other people. I mean, this picture I just showed you about my kids, we took probably 80 pictures. And I showed you the best one, right? So I didn't show you the ones where their eyes were closed, or one of them fell over, or the other one was picking the other one's nose just to be silly. So just remember that what you see on Facebook or in conversations, or even this talk, is, I filtered out all the coffee grounds, in other words, and I just gave you the lovely frothy latte part at the top. So don't compare, because it's often not relevant to your family and your why. I mean, you can get ideas. That's really useful to get ideas, but take what's useful for you and throw the other out. And on top of that, or connected to that, is realizing that education is life. It's not just the 1 hour or the 2 hours or the 4 hours or whatever that they're doing things with books. And I think I'm going to do a little show and tell right now. Oh, yes. This is connected with being a reflective practitioner. I'm kind of a recorder of things. So from a very young age, I kept scrapbooks of my kids. And when they got older, somewhere I have a photo book. I hope I find it soon. Maybe it didn't end up getting up here. Anyway, I'll show you. So this is just life of a young kid, right? But in these things here, you've got, she's reading an audio book. Here, they would do these are kind of Montessori things. Well, they're not really official Montessori things, but these kinds of activities where they just did, she just wanted to use clothes pegs all the time. So, this is actually a pre-writing exercise, but for her, it's just play. Here she is in daddy's shoes. Here she is writing, here we got some PE, but it's just life. And having education as just part of your life, I think that's really important. We took her one time to an antique show, an antique fair, and we gave her a disposable camera, and I gave her shapes to find, just to really keep her busy, right? And so she went around the antique fair looking for these shapes and taking these pictures. And one thing she had to do was find someone with earrings. And so she had to talk to the lady and say, I'm taking pictures and I need to find someone with earrings, and you have earrings, can I take your picture? It was just such a delightful and fun thing to do. But it wasn't school. It was a Sunday in Birmingham, but it was all just part of life. Additionally to that, once they get to, let's say your end point is 18, you're never, ever going to teach them everything they need to know. You're a home educating mom. How many new things have you learned this week? Probably tons. You haven't stopped learning. And you are modeling for your children that life is, after 18, is still education and still learning. And so one of my whys as my kids got older, and I realized, oh my gosh, when my daughter was 9, I was like, oh, she's halfway through. How long we're gonna have her? I'm running out of time. And it was like, you're never gonna teach them everything. So teach them, or encourage their curiosity, encourage their desire, let them explore things, and offer that. It's that feast thing again. It's that still waters and green pastures. But I wanted them to learn to learn. So a lot of things you see or a lot of things that I took pictures of in my scrapbooks or in my photo books was just process. It's all process. And you just want to make sure that at the end of the process that you're in charge of, they're ready to carry on their own. They've become somewhat independent. They've got their executive functioning. They've got their responsibilities. But you know, I've been doing this 20 years, so it didn't happen overnight. But just keep reminding yourself over and over, why are we doing this? What is my aim? And find the times that you succeeded, because they might be little, like, they emptied the dishwasher without being asked. Ah, hooray, that's a score. Okay, so that was my sort of first big section about the philosophy of why everyone does it, and how to keep that in mind as you're going along. Is there any questions that anyone has about that part there?
Anybody?
Or anything that you guys do?
So yeah, the chat is open, so if anyone has questions as Kat goes along, please do write them in, and then we can pick them up as we go along. Looks like we're good at the moment, Kat.
Okay, I saw a lot of people going like this, so I gathered it was resonating with people. All right, the next little bit, I'm going to talk about the most influential books I read right at the beginning. And sadly, there are a few of them that I can't find anymore. When I moved from England to America a few years ago, a lot of them I thought, I'm done with these, and I passed them on to other people, but they still resonate a lot with me. But I have some. So it'll probably be about 8 books. Like I said, I'll put them in a PDF later that people can look at, so you don't necessarily have to quickly, madly write them down. My number 1 book, though, was Educating the Wholehearted Child by Clay and Sally Clarkson. I love Sally Clarkson's books anyway. She does tend to now be more about her Christian ministry and motherhood than so much about homeschooling, because her kids are a lot older. But Educating the Wholehearted Child was the first book that opened me to the world of the heart of educating, and why you do it as a family and that sort of thing. I find just this book, and I think it went out of print, but I think it's back in print, hopefully. So that was a really good one. The other one that was really influential that I'm afraid I can't find right now is a book by the letter R, letter C, Sproul, Sproul, called When You Rise Up. And that was about the why of home educating as a Christian family. And he uses the Deuteronomy scripture a lot about, talk about me when you rise up, and when you go to bed, and when you're at the gate. And that was, I said that I didn't want my children to think that God was only God on Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he wasn't important. So early on, that's why I didn't send my children to the local school. And R.C. Sproul really articulated that well for me. Another one that was really influential was Jim Trelease's Read Aloud Handbook. I love this book because although he's talking about the early years and teaching your children to read when they're younger, and being really laid back about teaching children to read, he's much more of an organic method. It's like, read to them, and then eventually they'll probably learn to read, which isn't accurate for everybody, because some people do have special needs and need intervention. But that's kind of his premise on the one hand. But the main premise of this book is never stop reading to your children, even teenagers. So I love this book because it is timeless from that point of view. Another book I really love, particularly in the early years, was by Karen Andriola. I gave it away. It's called Pocket, I think it's Pocket Full of Pine Cones, or Pocket of Pine Cones. And it's an imagined outworking of the Charlotte Mason method in the young years. And I just love the way that they go through life, and then sometimes they do some school. I love that bit, or table work, maybe we call it. But her Charlotte Mason Companion is also a really basic book for the Charlotte Mason method, which is a very organic, book-oriented a broad feast of learning. So it's the style that suits me the most. And then we get into Charlotte Mason herself in the younger years, home education and and school education are good for the younger years. But as I'm moving into secondary school, this one is invaluable. This is where she taught, I mean, it's still good for the younger years too, but this is one of those that's timeless through the years because she covers younger years and middle years and teen years, philosophy of education. And if it's a little bit heavy going and too much detail, you can get the short version. Karen Glass's In Vital Harmony, where she explains the philosophy. She also has a book called Know and Tell, K-N-O-W, and Tell. That one is also my go-to book for helping people, particularly in primary years, when they're fretting about their child not writing or their child's having difficulty writing. Basically, people start way too young on formal writing, in my opinion. And I'm an English teacher. I'm an examiner for GCSEs and A-levels. And I'm saying, don't start so young. Do the method that Karen Glass got from Charlotte Mason, which is read, talk as they get, sort of year 5, year 6, let them tell you and you write down what they're saying, and then they can copy work it to learn how to write their own words longer. And then don't start writing until summaries and stuff until they're about 11 or 12. Because talking about it is writing about it, actually, just not by hand. There's 2 more books I want to bring up. One I don't have anymore, by Raymond Moore, M-O-O-R-E. It comes under 2 titles, and sometimes they're hard to find. One is called Better Late Than Early. The other one is called School Can Wait. They're the same book. One's just a bit more technical. And that one was, I read it when my kids were really young, and it was like, don't rush into formal education. They're not all ready for it. Boys they can be as much as 6 years behind in their brain development for literacy than girls when they're younger. And I'm thinking, why put them through the same expectations when they're much better building their Lego, playing in the dirt, getting their sensory synapses working, and making sure they're outside a lot so their eyesight develops properly. And all that is in School Can Wait or Better Late Than Early. Fantastic book. And it really takes the pressure off on trying to compare oneself to school and what schools do. The final, not necessarily this book, but the final author that I found probably more useful later in primary years. My 18-year-old was a real struggle. He was quite an oppositional child for a long time with things like sensory processing disorder and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he grew out of it, or he learned to control it. I don't really know. But Michael Gurian, this is the wrong book. This is Abigail James's book. Wrong book. But he writes a lot of stuff about male brains and female brains and educating. His books look like this. That was confusing to me. Gurian. And I don't immediately see in here one of his books, but he's really good about educating boys. And helped me a lot. Like, boys like different temperatures, they like different light, they like a bit of competition, things like that. So that was also another really good book. So those were influential books. But one thing that I think has been really important to me is that I continually read books about home education, my specialty, English and writing. And then just for pleasure too, reading nonfiction books and fiction books, just keep, add to my repertoire or my feast. And then, if I read a good one, I'll recommend it to my kids. So just throwing out an idea, a book I really enjoyed was called Animal Vegetable Miracle by Barbara Kingsolver. And then I also read her book, her fiction book called Flight Behavior. So just keeping books going all the time for your own brain, for your own development, but also, why would your kids pick up a book to read if you don't model it? If you model this, why wouldn't they copy that? And I think that's something that particularly people new to home education find hard. They go, I set out all this stuff for them to do, and I put this schedule for them, and they don't do their work unless I sit right with them. Well, you're not showing them that it's valuable to you, because they need to know that it's so important that you'll set aside your timetable to spend time with them, because it's valuable. And that's one of the reasons we actually home educated all four together at the same time, with my reading aloud to them all through primary school. I didn't really stop until my oldest was about 16, which is coming up to 5 years ago, yikes. But I still struggle now with my younger ones, spending more time on that's a thing I regret, actually, that my younger two are not as voracious readers as my older two. But they do take courses with really good books still. So they are reading some, but not like I would want them to. My eldest kept a reading list throughout high school that went in with her university application. And it was about 10 pages long, single spaced. And I don't think the other two, if they put their heads together, could muster about 3 pages. So there's still time. You see, here I am reflecting, and I'm like, I've still got 2 or 3 years with them. So guess what we're going to do later today? All right, so that was about reading, great books to read, and keeping up with your reading. Anyone want to recommend a really good nonfiction or fiction book they've been reading recently, or a book that they found really influential for their own homeschooling? You want to type them in. Do audiobooks count? Absolutely, they're reading. A really good audiobook. I loved The Green Mile on audio by Steven Spielberg. That was amazing. Not Steven Spielberg, Stephen King. Amazing book. It wasn't like his Carrie and his Cujo and those kinds of things. It was much more sophisticated. And I also did My Sister's Keeper by Picoult, Picoult recently. And that was really good because there's 7 different narrators and they use different actors. So that was particularly good too. What about books? Anyone wants to share really good books that were influential in your home education?
I'm going to unmute and just chime in here. So I refer to Raymond and Dorothy all the time, Better Late Than Early, because they say that children are not generally suited to formal education until they're at least 8 and probably as old as 12. So that helps just read. It's really, really just an excellent book. And Mary Pride is another one that I read in my early days, which I don't think you can get anymore all the way home. So she shaped quite a bit of my thinking as well. And of course the Clarksons. I don't get to read as much now as I would like to, but and one book that's very hard to get hold of, which is out of print, is Children in Chancery by Joy Baker, who's the lady who fought the local authority back in the 50s, 60s to win the right to educate her children. Well, not to win, to take back or take what the law said she could legally do. And that is excellent if people can get hold of it, but it's not easy. Apparently, I have been actually in communication with her grandchild, one of her grandchildren, and they possibly have some copies to pass on. So I'm looking into that.
Well, Juliet, if they would agree, we could get it formatted for Kindle and get it out there again.
Yeah, I have asked, but I'm not sure yet. The children themselves, who are now all in their 70s, 60s, 70s, were quite traumatized by that period of time by their local authority. They were, removed from their home, forcibly seized from their home and that kind of thing. So they don't actually really like to go back there. So they're a little more hesitant, you know. So that's where we you know, I'm working on that. I see Jana mentioned John Holt. I certainly found John Holt, How Children Fail and How Children Learn, to be most illuminating.
Yeah, I see that sometimes in my own children when they're sort of guessing an answer, and it's like, well, you're guessing, you know, what really is the answer. So that came from John Holt, realizing that they'll try to anticipate what you're wanting. So I try really hard to keep things open-ended for that reason.
There's some mentions in the chat if you want to take a look at the chat, or if you want me to read anything to you from the chat.
Now I can see, and I was going to just add with Rebecca's Children of the New Forest. Rebecca, you might enjoy Du Maurier's book called The King's General. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it is set during the English Civil War. And I really enjoyed that book. Now, my specialty, so I actually have a PhD in literary history. My thesis was on prison writing during the interregnum. So you talk about getting really detailed on something, but Du Maurier's book brought something out to me about the English Civil War that in all of my studies I hadn't quite appreciated. And that is the ravages on the people that war causes when a hungry army, whether the army you support or the army that's against you, comes through your estate. And they take every last scrap of food that you've got stored away. They trample your fields. They take all of your herds and everything you've saved up. They take all the paneling off your walls, and they leave your estate destitute. And because you couldn't just pop to the shops and buy some green beans from Kenya or something, they were left starving. And it just never occurred to me about that. And I learned it in a fiction book. Yeah, Du Maurier, The King's General. I like Du Maurier in general, by the way. Okay, so we're nearly done. So I'm going to rush through another couple of things. The first thing is, if you've still got a young family, I am glad that in my early years of home educating, I didn't have a car, and I lived in a town that was quite quiet. We had like a pram service and things like that, but there wasn't really very much going on. And I'm really glad that early on in my home education, we weren't running here and there and everywhere and getting involved in a lot of things. So we had to find our own rhythm. We had to find our own activities to do, and the kids learned to sort of potter around the garden and look in the pond. And I think that was really great to establish ourselves, and establish leisure time can be something really simple. But then later on, we did start a co-op, and those were some of the best, most fondest memories of home education. And I did actually have the photo book. So this is our co-op when they were really young. We went on a weekend trip to Wales, and I ran it for, I think, about 7 years. You know, we went to, this was the Imperial War Museum. Yes, my child climbed into bed in the museum, went to sleep. It's like, where is she? Where is she? They were pretending to sleep in the submarine. You know, just even going on the underground in London was just fantastic. And then, you know, the next week we were back at my house and just having a party. So that was really fond memories. The kids made really good relationships, and I'm still very close to the women that we ran the co-op with. They really are sort of still my go-to people, even though we haven't done the co-op for about 6 years now, I would think. The two more things. One thing that I did well was keeping the delight in the learning even through the teen years, because I know there's a lot of pressure on exams and things, but it's my own view that you can pick and choose your exams. Some are easier than others. Some require just knowing the skills and applying it to the exam instead of necessarily cramming a bunch of information. But keeping keeping that breadth. I think keeping the breadth's really important. That's just as a Charlotte Mason person, probably as an American liberal arts person, I find that important to do, but not being afraid to outsource. So I've outsourced things for my children, partly to have a different voice teaching them, partly because I've chosen people to do it who are really experts in their fields and not just teach a textbook, but they're like, the textbook says this, but let me tell you about this and this and this and this, just to spark their enthusiasm. And outsourcing, when it's in a group of people, there is that a little bit of level of competition, but also a little bit of that level of socialization that they can get. And it's been online mostly, the outsourcing. And it was really helpful during COVID time and lockdown that my kids were already very comfortable in the online setting. So they continued to thrive just like normal. And that was one of the few things in their lives during COVID that was sort of normal. Whereas I know a lot of people who went from live to online really struggled. Well, I was running a co-op here actually, and we went online from having been live, and the kids really they didn't make the transition that well. Okay, if I were to say I had regrets, my biggest regret is not doing enough nature study. We did it a lot when they were younger, but I would have liked to have done more. I think losing the family rhythm or the family connection during teen times when everyone's like, foop, 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 foop. I think I would have, but you know, I still can. I want to find time that we still connect together and I still read to them something together. They're always like, nah, but you know, it's important to me, to my family, that we learn together always, something together while we can. I think I probably would have liked to have done a bit more one-on-one time with some of them, just making dates and taking them somewhere where they wanted to go. One thing I did well, two things I did well, I want to say that I forgot to say. One is having a masterly inactivity in the afternoon, which means not setting things for them to do, but leaving them alone to do their own things. So, and it worked better when we had the screens off. So they would make their own board games, they would draw, they would do crafts. But it's fascinating, this last year when COVID lockdown happened and all of our sort of swimming and church and youth group and jobs and volunteering and all of that stopped, my kids did some really amazing things in their masterly inactivity, and my 18-year-old has thrived more than ever. He's what do I say? He's recorded another artist on cassette tape and sold them worldwide as a little business. He has programmed an AI to take some images and create new images out of it, taught a bot to put that onto Twitter. He's taken up screen printing. He bought a soldering iron. He's doing airbrushing. I mean, he's just into so many different activities because he's got the time. So he doesn't spend a lot of it playing computer games. He's doing all of these sort of hobbies and learning, teaching himself new things. The next one that he's going to start today is learning to repair a dishwasher. So masterly inactivity, I think, is a really important thing to build into your day. Just a time when they're bored and have to come up with things where they entertain themselves. And then finally, I did mention at the beginning, was having pets. I've taught more about the birds and the bees through the pets than I ever would have if I had to sit down with a book and say, okay, this is what's going on. I remember when my son, who's now 14, saw my dogs breeding, and he was saying, good thing people don't do it that way. And I was like, So it does open a lot of things about responsibility and husbandry. Right now, my daughter is fostering the kittens, and she's not getting out of bed early enough, and she's having to learn, you know, I need to be responsible for these kittens so they will thrive. having fish taught chemistry, and anyway, I think if one can have some kind of animal. I know that when I was still in England, we had a number of friends who had either stick insects or land snails, and they always had this problem about overpopulation and having to do something with them. And that's part of the husbandry, is when you breed them and you're very popular in your breeding, you're very good at your breeding, what do you do next? Because that's part of being responsible for the animals, is having somewhere for them to go. So we're coming to the end now. So that's pretty much the 45 minutes that we had allotted for this. But are there any questions, or anyone want to add anything about maybe their regrets or something that they did well that they want to share? So for those coming after us, they have some ideas. Rebecca, did you raise your hand, or did you just adjust your screen?
Adjusted the screen. Sorry. I still feel like I have so much to learn. I mean, I do have 2 that aren't being home educated now. And I'm pretty happy with how their education has gone. But I have 4 smaller ones that we're still trying to educate, and everything changes, and every child has such different needs. I have to relearn with each one what I have to do.
But you're absolutely right. You've got one who's very academic, and he's done some really hard studies, and then you've got the other who's gone off onto blacksmith school.
Yes.
So you are a really good example of how you have to tailor to, or not you have to tailor, you've shown a really good sensitivity to their strengths and their desires. And not everyone will go even to any kind of further education, and realizing that some are different than others.
I think they're both happy with their choices, and as long as they're happy, that's all right with me. We can figure out everything else.
I think when you do get into teen years, you do start doing some negotiation. I do have one who is anti-education. We're going through a pretty hard period right now, but she's a very good swimmer, and she can probably swim at university with a scholarship. And we just need to get her into some competitions where the competition is showing her success again. And I think she just needs to see some success, because COVID was really bad for her, really bad year for her. So she's lost sort of a goal. But I think if you've lost the goal, then you just keep sort of moving forward, even if they're tiny, tiny little steps.
I just really love when I learned about masterly inactivity, I didn't understand what it was. And we were in a book club reading the Charlotte Mason home school education. And to now, without really noticing, I've done, like when you think about something all the time, you actually do it without meaning to. And to now see my children and what they do, like one of them is writing books. She's 8, 9, 10, 9. She's 9. She writes little books and she sells them at church for £5 a piece. And then she puts all the money in the offering plate. But during her masterly inactivity, she writes those books and does them herself. And she wanted to sew a dress for a doll. And it's like, oh, I was trying to find patterns. And she was like, she looked at me, and I could see her face drop, because I was coming around with Google and patterns, and I didn't want to do this. So she just really wanted me to give her a needle and a thread, and then she would go upstairs by herself and come up with make this dress by herself. And another one wrote. So this is really, really showing me that they're actually teaching themselves so many things, and they're really, really embracing it and learning so much that I wouldn't know how to sew a dress. But she figured it out for herself, because I didn't interfere. When I was interfering, I could see that she was losing her motivation. And when I left her to it, she went off and did it. So this is something that I really have to work hard on this.
I think this is one thing that people saying that doing computer games is creative and all that. And I just think, look, one time my kids decided they wanted to make a zip wire in our back garden. And I bought them the stuff. They told me what to buy. I bought them all the equipment. They went and they set it up. They tied it in the tree and they tied it to here. And they climbed up the tree and they asked me to help them get onto the little disc from the swing to sit on, and they were going to zip wire down. And so I helped them get on that, and then I let go, and they went straight down to the ground because it was a bungee cord and they hadn't made it tight enough. And they then had to work out, you know, how are we going to make this tighter so it does work? And eventually it did work, but it kept dropping them into the nettles. So then they had to cut the nettles. And I'm thinking, you know, the problem is on the computer, it doesn't allow you to fail. I mean, okay, you might die if you get shot or something, but it doesn't allow you to fail in the real world with physics. In Minecraft, you can build a tower as tall as you want and it never falls over. You try that with Lego, you try that with blocks, you get so high it falls over. And I just think that masterly inactivity, when they have to do just what is, you know, making a den and realize their blankets aren't big enough or whatever, I think until they do that cause and effect and that you know, attempts and fails and perfecting things, I think until they do that and have time to do that, that's a part of life that I think is missing. So masterly inactivity was really important, I think, throughout their lives.
I think that learning becomes play for them, actually. So
Right.
all of that is actually play, but it changes as they get older. The nature of it changes, but it's still play, and it's the brain is still playing in a way, and it's really important.
My son bought this amplifier. Well, he bought this one amplifier and he got this other one free, and he really wanted the free one, but it wasn't working. And he's been studying all the different things that could be wrong with it. He's bought components, he's changed the components, it's still not working. So he's either after going to have to say, yeah, it's really broken, or he's going to keep working on trying to fix it. But, you know, he has the time to work on it. And I think that was something that I recognized as a school teacher, that my students at Headington and Wychwood schools in Oxford, they didn't have time to do anything but homework and ride the bus to school and possibly some weekend activities, but they were so time pressured and never had enough to just practice things and attempt things and fail at things.
Okay,
anyway,
Molly's, we've got a comment here. We have lots of time for play or discovering themselves. I think it's a John Holt concept too. And it is, because also John Holt spoke about being productive, that children like to be productive. When they're productive, they're making something. They know that if I do this and this and this, it'll make something. And there's a purpose to it. Whereas I think the problem with the curriculums and so on in school is often the children don't understand where it's going and what it's for. So they don't invest in the same way. And I think,
that's a good expression. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's probably us done for the day, right? Anyone else? Or you can catch Kat on the app. I've seen she is around. She is busy. And you can also set up virtual meetups. If anyone wants to sort of have conversations further about this, you can go on the app and it's virtual meetups or something like that. And you can set up your own Zooms for conversations you can invite people to. So that's what I love about it. We can have all those conversations, but virtually. So thank you, Kat. Thank you for being part of the Learn Free community now, a few years now, and for your contribution. And well, let's give Kat a round of applause.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Enjoy your dinner. And if you're able to join the political talks this evening, that would be great too.